Forget whispers, this was a royal detonation, the kind that rattles chandeliers and shatters polite silence in gilded corridors. Because the moment King Charles III decided the line had been crossed, the entire palace machine shifted from dignified restraint to icy exposure. The word moving through court circles wasn't family dispute, it was blackmail. And at the center of the storm? A father, a daughter, and a monarchy that finally stopped pretending this was just awkward family drama. For years, the crown stayed quiet while Thomas Markle Sr. gave interviews, sold memories, and hinted he had more to say. More photos, more letters, more truth. Each appearance dangled the same unspoken message: pay attention to me, or I'll talk louder. But this time, insiders say, the tone of his latest claims hit a nerve so raw that palace aides stopped calling it sad and started calling it dangerous. Not just embarrassing to Meghan Markle, dangerous to the institution itself. Because when Thomas went on television accusing senior royals of emotionally destroying his daughter, naming Catherine, Princess of Wales, as some kind of behind-the-scenes villain, the palace didn't see a grieving father. They saw escalation. They saw a man, as one court insider brutally put it, monetizing proximity to the throne. And then came the move no one expected: a coordinated palace response. Not a leak, not a background briefing, an actual sharpened statement pushed out with legal precision from Buckingham Palace itself. The message between the formal lines was unmistakable. Thomas Markle does not speak for this family, has never represented this family, and any suggestion otherwise is false. But beneath the polished language was steel. References to manipulation, distortion, financial pressure. Courtiers didn't have to spell it out, everyone heard the word extortion anyway. Behind closed doors, the mood reportedly turned from weary tolerance to cold strategy. One senior aide described it like this: the monarchy can survive scandal. What it will not tolerate is being treated like an ATM with a coat of arms. And suddenly, old incidents that once seemed like tabloid noise were being re-examined as part of a pattern. The staged paparazzi photos before the wedding, the paid interviews, the steady drip of private anecdotes appearing for a price. What once looked like messy family fallout now looked, to palace lawyers, like a long game. Meanwhile, across the ocean in Montecito, the silence from Meghan and Prince Harry was louder than any press conference. No fiery rebuttal, no emotional denial, just gates closed, statements withheld, and what one insider called containment mode. Meghan, sources say, was blindsided by how far her father pushed this, especially dragging Catherine's name directly into the fire. That crossed a line even critics admit she never publicly crossed herself. But inside royal walls, the focus shifted fast from Meghan's feelings to the crown's survival. Princess Anne, long known as the family's most no-nonsense operator, reportedly took a hard stance in private meetings, arguing this wasn't about family therapy, it was about precedent. If someone could profit from attacking the monarchy while claiming emotional grievance, where did it stop? Today, a father-in-law. Tomorrow, a distant cousin with a podcast and a grudge. Then came the detail that made even seasoned royal watchers blink: a private letter allegedly sent by Thomas directly to Catherine. Half apology, half veiled pressure, according to whispers from within palace security circles. It wasn't just seen as inappropriate, it was logged, reviewed, and treated as a potential security and legal issue. The message that rippled through staff ranks after that was chillingly simple: this is no longer just media drama. This is a reputational threat. At Sandringham House, emergency consultations reportedly unfolded with legal advisors and senior household figures. Files were opened, financial trails examined, years of interviews and payments mapped out. One aide described the process as building a ledger of loyalty versus leverage. And according to that same source, the conclusion was brutal. Thomas wasn't acting like a wounded parent. He was acting like someone who believed his connection to Meghan was an asset to be exploited. Hovering over all of it was Prince William, watching as his wife's name got dragged into an international spectacle she never publicly engaged in. Those close to him say this is where things turn personal, not because of gossip, but because of boundaries. There is an unspoken rule in royal life: you can criticize the institution, but you do not target individual family members with explosive claims and expect eternal patience. And through it all, Catherine did the one thing that drives tabloids crazy: she carried on. Public appearances, measured smiles, no visible reaction, which, in palace terms, is a reaction louder than any interview. Stability is power. And in a narrative suddenly full of chaos, she became the image of the opposite. Back in London, the legal tone hardened. Discussions of cease and desist letters, Warnings to broadcasters about airing unverified accusations as fact. Quiet signals to media executives that access to royal events is a privilege, not a right. No dramatic courtroom scenes, just a tightening net of consequences. The unspoken message from the top was clear: the crown will not be emotionally blackmailed in public for profit, not by enemies, and not by in-laws. And as this royal chess game intensified, one question began echoing through both palaces and press rooms alike. If this is how firmly the monarchy responds to a father with a microphone, what happens next if he keeps talking? The real shockwave didn't hit when the palace spoke. It hit when the palace didn't stop. Because once the crown publicly drew that line, insiders say the strategy flipped from defense to quiet containment. And containment in royal terms can feel a lot like exile without ever using the word. Invitations tightened, guest lists shrank, access routes narrowed. The monarchy wasn't yelling, it was closing doors with velvet gloves on. At the center of the tightening circle was still Meghan Markle, caught in a nightmare that looked, to some, like karma, and to others, like collateral damage. Sources close to California insist she was furious, not at the palace, not even at the press, but at her father for detonating a bomb that landed squarely on her life again. She had spent years trying to build a post-royal identity, a brand carefully curated around independence, causes, and control. Now every headline dragged her back into a storyline she couldn't script. Daughter of the man the palace was effectively freezing out. And the palace? It was done playing emotional chess. Behind the scenes, legal advisors to King Charles III reportedly began drafting broader protective measures. Frameworks designed not just for this crisis, but for any future figure trying to profit from a royal connection. One aide described it as future-proofing the crown against family freelancing. Translation: never again would someone be able to dangle a royal surname in front of a camera and claim moral authority without consequences. Meanwhile, Prince William's posture shifted in ways even longtime staff noticed. Usually cautious, usually silent, he was said to be done absorbing. Not loud, not explosive, just resolute. Those close to him say the tipping point wasn't political, it was personal. When accusations started circling around his wife, that ended any appetite for patience. In private briefings, William reportedly made one thing clear: protecting the dignity of Catherine, Princess of Wales, was non-negotiable. And Catherine? She never took the bait. No emotional statements, no visible frustration. She showed up to events, shook hands, listened to families, and smiled with that calm, almost unshakable composure that drives critics wild because it gives them nothing to twist. Palace watchers say that silence was its own masterstroke. While others shouted, she embodied steadiness. In a storm, the still figure becomes the symbol. Across the Atlantic, the pressure on Prince Harry thickened like fog. For years, he had positioned himself as Meghan's fiercest defender against the British press and royal structures. But now, the threat wasn't coming from courtiers or tabloids. It was coming from her own father. And Harry's silence, strategic or stunned, began to look, in palace eyes, like a vacuum. One insider put it bluntly: when the attack is from outside the institution, you fight the institution. When it's from inside the family, you have to choose your ground. He hasn't. That perception stung more than any public criticism, because inside royal logic, loyalty is measured not just by words, but by who you distance yourself from. And Thomas Markle was fast becoming radioactive. Media outlets, wary of legal heat and palace displeasure, reportedly started hesitating. Invitations cooled. Projects paused. Executives who once saw him as a ratings magnet now saw risk. Inside Buckingham Palace, staff referred to it as the firewall. No photos, no informal contact, no room for accidental association. If Thomas spoke, he spoke alone. The monarchy would not amplify him by reacting emotionally again. The first statement had drawn the boundary. Everything after that would be handled through lawyers, policy, and quiet institutional muscle. But the most brutal shift wasn't legal, it was symbolic. Thomas had always leaned on the emotional narrative. Father shut out, heartbroken, unheard. Yet palace insiders say investigators were quietly assembling a timeline of interviews, deals, and pitches that painted a far more transactional picture. Nothing criminal stated publicly, just a pattern that in royal eyes turned heartbreak into a business model. And once that interpretation took hold inside palace corridors, sympathy evaporated. What made the situation even more combustible was the broader message it sent. If someone connected by marriage could try to leverage royal proximity so aggressively, others might follow. That's why this wasn't treated as just Meghan's family drama. It became a case study in institutional survival. The crown has lasted centuries by adapting. Now it was adapting to the age of tell-all culture and viral interviews. For Meghan, the tragedy was layered. The more the palace hardened against her father, the more she risked being seen through the same lens, fairly or not. Insiders say she feared exactly that, guilt by association, even when she had no control over his actions. Her team's dilemma was brutal: speak out and drag the feud further into daylight, or stay silent and watch others define the narrative. Harry, caught between blood family and chosen family, stood in the most painful spot of all. Every move carried a cost. Defend the palace, and he looks like he's turning on Meghan's father. Defend Thomas, and he risks detonating what remains of trust with his own relatives. Do nothing, and both sides read into the silence. Back in royal circles, though, the mood had crystallized into something colder than anger: finality. The monarchy had drawn its line, not with shouting, not with theatrics, with policy, distance, and a clear refusal to be emotionally cornered in public. And as winter settled over palace roofs, one truth hardened like frost: this was never just a family feud. It was a warning shot to anyone who believed royal connection could be cashed in without consequence. Because the crown can survive scandal, it can survive criticism. What it will not tolerate, what it is now proving it will fight with quiet, relentless force, is the idea that loyalty can be auctioned, and that the monarchy will simply pay to make the noise stop.